Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, Derek, got a fun and exciting episode for you guys today, and honestly, it's not often we get to say there's been a big innovation and improvement in the world of Super Nintendo emulation. That is because last year I did a preview of Limited Run Games' new version of Doom, where Randy Linden basically created the Super FX3 chip in code to allow that game to run faster and better than it ever could before, and that was absolutely amazing, and in conjunction with that, they also developed code for a Rumble controller. A developer going by the name of Kandowantu, super nice person, basically went in and added Rumble to Star Fox so you could kind of get that controller working on your PC or with other controllers that had Rumble and basically bring haptic feedback to Super Nintendo. Well, now as of today, Messin has incorporated the Super FX3 code, and Kandowantu has updated his kind of reworking of Star Fox to use this new code and new quote-unquote chip to give you better performance in Super FX games. And that is not only exciting for something like Star Fox, it's also exciting for the future, because now homebrew developers can work with the Super FX3 code, being able to do things on Super Nintendo that were never thought possible before. And something like Star Fox is going to allow for a much faster frame rate and a more consistent frame rate, hovering around 20 frames per second and getting really close to locking onto that. And again, because this is the early days, it's possible that there might even be more improvement that could happen in the future. We're just going to have to wait and see. But again, getting improvements to something like Super FX chips on the Super Nintendo emulation, and hopefully soon flashcards, really is going to blow the doors wide open for some really fun projects in the future. And honestly, for me personally, I can't wait to see what developers actually come up with, because they're highly creative, and honestly, you know it's going to be a full force sprint to figure out what you can do with this thing and try to impress people out there. But what I really love is a console that obviously came out when some of you weren't even alive is still getting innovations to this day, still getting new code commits, and a company like Limited Run Games, who in the past I have said some less than kind things about, but honestly they've been improving their process, at least around the edges, is going to go ahead and make something like this for everyone to enjoy. And the reality is Limited Run Games could have definitely kept this code for themselves, given it to developers to produce new games, and had exclusive publishing rights to stuff like Rumble and the Super FX3 chip. So the fact that they put that code out, made it available for everyone to work with, and now we have an emulation, and somebody like Kandowantu can go into Star Fox and improve it with that code, that is very good as far as the community is concerned. It's something we definitely need, and hopefully at some point in time this could come over to FPGA cores as well, so these games could run on your Superstation 1s, Mr. FPGAs, and Analog Pockets of the world. But think of it this way, if you have a CPU on something like the Super Nintendo or Super FX3 chip that can provide more power to the hardware, imagine all the fun things you could do with something like that. And just because Doom was the first game to use that code, I would love to see something like a Super Nintendo port of Hexen, or maybe even a down conversion to Jumping Flash. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, if you had your ability to snap your fingers and make one new game appear on Super Nintendo with the Super FX3 chip, what would it be? But as the boss ship comes in, taking a look at the frame counter at the top left hand corner, sure it says 50, but you can see the fluidity overall in something like Star Fox here, because back in the day when this game came out, we were impressed that it could even show 3D on our TVs, and frame rate really wasn't something that got talked about whatsoever. We just enjoyed what we had. And sure, the frame rate's going to dip down a little bit when you actually go ahead and have big explosions on screen, but it is still maybe the most impressive version of Star Fox you're going to be able to play. And again, this is just basic a ROM hack to the original game. If you build something from the ground up around the Super Nintendo and Super FX3 code, I'm sure you'll get better performance, because the code base will be planning on it the entirety of the actual development time. Because that's really the thing. New projects will be able to benefit from this probably slightly more than existing projects, but there's going to be so many things to benefit from it. It's going to be a win across the board, and that's something I love, because honestly I keep saying in 2026 we're in a new golden era of emulation and retro gaming. We keep getting new and fun things basically every single week, and something like Super FX3 code now being available for anyone to use is probably the biggest thing to happen to Super Nintendo in the last couple of years, and that is definitely saying something, because Super Nintendo always gets a lot of fun things going on. Let's do our first soundtrack sample just so you can hear the audio quality and realize even if the game's running faster doesn't change the audio, and I'll be right back with a lot more Star Fox and SFX3. I mean, definitely sounds like Star Fox to me, and that is a positive thing. Now, moving back to one of my captures of Doom on a beta build that Limited Run Games sent to me on a cartridge, it definitely was impressive how much faster they could get this thing to run. Because obviously the Super FX 3, even if it isn't true silicon in the way that we're playing Star Fox on it, it just basically takes everything about the Super FX 2 chip, dials up the clock speed, gives it new features, and allows it just to run faster. Now, obviously this isn't something that could have been done back in the day on Super Nintendo, because the Super FX 2 chip was already kind of pushing what was available technology-wise for something like a console add-on. Sure, there was more powerful hardware out there, but don't forget, they popped these chips into cartridges and tried to sell them to consumers for around the same exact price, which definitely is something that you don't get away with all that often. I do appreciate the fact that Nintendo really didn't have to beat people up too badly for these carts. But taking a look at the motion here, just see how fluid this game is, even around 20 frames per second when you're doing the barrel roll and everything else is going on. As long as there's not a massive graphical effect explosion on the screen, it really is probably the smoothest feeling Star Fox you're ever going to see. And that definitely is in of itself very impressive, and I can't wait to see what else Kandowantu and his team basically do with this. And if you haven't played any of Kandowantu's games before, I did leave in the description below both the repo to the GitHub so you can grab Messin with this code incorporated into it, as well as the ROM hack for Star Fox, so you can play around with this yourself. Now granted, it's just going to be something like Star Fox right now, because this basically happened in the last 24 hours, at least as I record this audio. It was going to take, 6 months, a year, maybe even 2 years, for people to really get their heads wrapped around this, and for you to start seeing a lot more fun games. But if you know the retro gaming community, you know full well when there is a new tool set, a new piece of hardware, a new feature out there that can improve existing games as well as make new games run even better and have more features or more effects, it is absolutely going to get taken advantage of in all the best ways possible. That means we're all going to win in the future when it comes to Super Nintendo games. And I would say the Super FX 3 code being added in and being allowed to be used by anybody is right up there with the MSU1 stuff on Super Nintendo, getting full motion video and CD quality audio into Super Nintendo games. It just takes the base hardware and expands upon it in ways that were unimaginable back in the day. Sure, it's not going to make it a PlayStation 1, N64, or Sega Saturn, but it feels a hell of a lot more powerful than a Super Nintendo, kind of making it feel, even though this doesn't really exist, like a 24-bit console, not a 16-bit console. It really helps us remember these games and enjoy them the way our nostalgia tells us. Because if you haven't played Star Fox for a long time, you remember it from being a kid, you think to yourself the game ran great and you had fun with it. And maybe if you actually go and play it right now, you'll find out that your memory of the game and how it ran is completely different than the reality of it. That's something we see a lot of in the Super FX games and even the 32-bit generation. And now with decomps, recomps, and PC ports, people are getting the games to run the way their memory tells them they used to back in the day, and now we're going to be seeing some of that on the Super Nintendo side of things as well, with the Super FX 3 chip being available to code for, and that is definitely a win. The more ways we can play games, the better. One more soundtrack sample just because the music is that good, and I'll be right back with a lot more fun. So yeah, Randy Linden and the Limited Run Games team that basically made this happen and made the Super FX 3 code did an amazing job. It's amazing that it was released for everyone in Kandowantu, patching it into Star Fox. Also, again, 10 out of 10 fun. If you haven't played a Star Fox EX, I can't recommend it enough, and hopefully that sees an upgrade to Super FX 3 code as well. But it's going to be a very bright future for Super Nintendo games and fan developers out there doing a lot with the hardware. Because if you asked anyone, the number one thing they would want out of any single system for retro homebrew development would probably be more horsepower to be able to run the games faster or to have more features. And with Super FX 3 now available to code for, that's exactly what you're getting. You're getting more horsepower for free for the community, and that's definitely a 10 out of 10 win any day of the week and twice on Sundays, as I like to say. So if you want to play this one, the links are in the description below. Go ahead and have fun with it. And again, if you haven't played Kandowantu Star Fox EX, can't recommend it enough. But short of that, we're done. We're going to keep taking the fight to the bad guys here, and I'll see you next time, or we're going to die. Bye-bye.